Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Good, True, and Beautiful. I am so excited today to introduce you to an individual, a new voice, a deep, deep well of wisdom and beauty and light that I don't know how I hadn't come across his writings before, but they crossed my desk, and for the last month or so, I have taken a nosedive into his work, and I can tell you this, he is one of us. The way he's translated the world is just beautiful, and I'm so excited to introduce him today and have him join us at the conversation. That being said, Mark Nepo is joining us from Michigan, America. Mark, welcome to the conversation.
Oh, thank you, Ashton. It's great to be with you today.
Yes, sir. So, poet, teacher, storyteller, all of the above. Where do you begin when you introduce yourself and your work in the world?
Oh, I just begin, I think maybe start by saying, I think every person that's ever lived and will live will get an opportunity to be dropped into the depth of life.
Hmm.
And that's where the journey really begins. And for me, that really, I'm also, in addition to the other things you mentioned, a long-term cancer survivor, 30 years.
Wow.
And, in my 30s, and so that really dropped me into the depth of life. And I think that and we'll talk more about this, that it doesn't have to be life-threatening or catastrophic. We could be dropped into the depth of life by beauty or wonder or being seen and heard for the first time. But that's just what happened to me.
Yeah.
And so that was the doorway into inhabiting a heart view of the world that I always felt was naturally there, but after almost dying, I really woke up in it.
Yeah. That was your die before you die moment.
Yeah,
Literally.
yeah. And so, I understand, and I think things become clear in retrospect. I think we live forward, but just staying true to whatever calls, and then I look back and it seems to make sense.
Yeah,
And
totally.
so, I think the poet in me, I've always, from an early age, I've always understood the world through metaphor, before I even knew what metaphor was. And so, that's really been my doorway into reality. And the philosopher in me tries to be in conversation and understand what all those metaphors carry. And the cancer survivor in me, I'm very committed as a teacher to say, okay, if that speaks to us, then how do we apply that to our very specific lives, our very personal days? Where does it live in us?
Yeah. Once you fall into that one great big life, where do you go from there? What does it mean?
Yeah, and it's very unique for each. While we all go through similar passages, which is what I think Carl Jung meant when he talked about archetypes, that there are arches or passageways that everyone goes through: birth, death, love, loss, friendship, betrayal, trust. You can go on, but no two people go through them exactly the same way, and that's why, while we can share and compare notes, there is no how-to.
Mm-hmm. So you say almost there was a quote or somewhere where I was watching a conversation that you had, and I'm going to paraphrase, so hold my hand here if I get it incorrect. But you said something along the lines of, "The deeper I go into myself, I find you, and the deeper I go into you, I will find myself." And I love how you talk about comparing notes, and that the human experience is equally individual and unique, but also equally universal.
Yeah, and I think, yes, you paraphrased that well. I think I've learned through what I've been through, just that we think that we're different, and then great love and great suffering always uncover that we are the same. There's a great the Christian desert mystic fathers in the 3rd century had a wonderful metaphor for this, and yet even how it affects community. And it was that of a spoked wheel, like a wagon wheel you might see on a Western. And so we all can imagine that. Well, what they offered was that every spoke is an individual soul. And when we go out into the world, we inhabit our uniqueness. That is, no two spokes hold up the same spot on the rim. But if I go inward into me, I find you, because we all meet in the hub in the center. And that hub is the unnameable. You can call it God, you can call it nature, you can call it the cosmic universe, you have 1,000 names, but that hub and the rim is community.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as we live out in our uniqueness, we take our place in holding us all together. But when I go into my deepest place, we find each other.
Beautiful.
And one other thing about that is that you take any one of those parts out and you don't have a wheel.
Wow. Yes. Wow. I got a feeling you and I are about to geek out on metaphors for about an hour. So I ask everyone this question, or I ask it a lot. But are there any daily disciplines, morning rituals? Is there anything that every day, rain, sleet, snow, or shine, that keeps you grounded, centered at the soul level?
Yes,
that
sure.
question.
I would say, and first let me preface that by saying, I'm 67, and at different points in my life, I have studied different things in a concentrated way, meditating and different things. But at this point in my life, I purposely am really committed to an integrated practice. So the first thing I do every morning, I do two things. One is I pull up our blinds to let light in.
Let's go.
And the second thing, well, actually, there's three things. The second thing is I prepare coffee for my dear wife, Susan. And the third thing is I get my puppy up and hug her and take care of and feed her. So every day I'm consciously letting light in, doing something for someone I love, and feeding life. And then I get up into my study where I am now, and where Zuzu, my yellow lab, is sleeping right next to me. And then I begin to listen, because writing is really about listening. And then taking notes and staying in conversation with life. And then, during the day, that's usually the morning, roughly. But then I make sure in the afternoon that I am in conversation with others like you, or that I'm out in the world purposely doing errands. And then I like to wind up at some kind of cafe setting sometime in the afternoon, because I love that. I love the coffee house scene, my field office.
Yeah, no doubt. I love the. I love how fast you kind of just came with that rhythm and routine. Light, coffee, light, life, taking notes. Those are really these beautiful anchor points that I assume that you've kind of just. It's not like they're checklist anymore. They're just part of who you are and what you do each day.
Well, yeah, and I would also offer, as we talk about process, which I appreciate your asking, is that I think it's very important to say that the value of the process is that it's a common human process. It's not just if you want to be a writer or if you want to be an artist. That I happen to write it down, but it doesn't matter if you write it down. It's what is your process for letting light in, for caring for others, for listening, for being in relationship every day. And that's what's really valuable about it. One other thing that I have come to do is, I, like many people, I start, and then once I get going, I'll make a list of what I want to explore or need to take care of during the day. But, having almost died from cancer and still being here, then what I do is I take a sip of coffee and I ask myself, well, if today's the only day I have left, what really belongs on the list? And then a lot of that list goes away and other things go on the list, like call my dearest, oldest friend and tell him I love him, even though he knows it. And so I still make the list, but then I unmake the list.
Yeah. That's so good. That reminds me, I think you had an entry in Things That Join the Sea and Sky, and it was about, I think it was something about the thieves, and it was about a to-do
Yes,
list.
quieting the thieves.
Quieting the thieves. And I loved how you said, I'm finding the page here. Let me just tell you the story of quieting the thieves. 2 days ago, my wife and two girls were at the swimming pool. And I read Quieting the Thieves. She's like 100 yards away on the other side of like this huge Olympic pool watching the girls jump in. I literally get out from under my introvert shade tree of reading your book, and I walk over there in the blazing sun and go, you need to read this right now. It was the Quieting the Thieves moment. That's why it triggered with me. But you write in there that we carry these lists near our heart and finger them like worry beads. I mean, just good gosh, what an amazing way to break that down. And then you just kind of talk about how at some point they
Well,
vanish, right?
and that's a good, yeah, and it's a good. So this really was, as you know, but for our listeners, where I was just caught in the rain on the way to a cafe, and I pulled out when I got in there. I pulled out my list, my little list, and everything. The rain had blurred all the things on the list. At last, I couldn't follow it. I had to give it up.
Yeah, at
And
last. That's what gutted me in those words. You just go, at last.
but the lesson, and this is a good example of by listening, the reward for listening is we get insight. So at the end of that piece, there's a sentence in there that says, the greatest thief is the insidious virtue to believe that everything has to be in order before we live. And I didn't know that when I first started writing that. I didn't like, oh, that'll be a neat thing to end with. No, by being listening and being opening my heart to that moment and following the feeling, I was rewarded with that insight.
So I guess to reflect on that, in a sense, you're saying that you're not always going to have your dominoes lined up, that to have everything in order and precise and perfect and so forth is to rob life of its serendipity, if you will.
Well, yeah, and even not serendipity, even more so, it's essential. It's essential resources. So let's for a second here. Let's talk for a second about perfection and about the dominoes. So the first thing is that William Blake in his aphorisms, he has one that says, "Straight is the road to improvement, but crooked is the road to genius."
Oh,
Yes.
that's salty. Repeat that again.
Straight is the road to improvement, but crooked is the road to genius. So not only is that profound in that we have to follow, I mean, the word trust literally means follow your heart. Not only do we have to follow our heart, but let's stop for a minute and look at the word genius. And let me pause for a second and say, I'm very interested in word origins, but not because I'm a word geek, but because just as how things in nature are eroded over time, well, words are eroded over time.
Totally.
So it's very helpful to look at their earlier meanings because they're more whole. So genius, we think of genius today, and its meaning is someone with a particular extraordinary brilliance, like a Mozart or an Einstein or Stephen Hawking, or all kinds of people you can come up with. But the original notion of genius means attendant spirit. Everyone has an attendant spirit. It's not reserved for those who have extraordinary gifts. This is where the word genie comes from. Aladdin's lamp, that myth really says, if you embrace your life and your experience like the lamp, then your genie will appear, and your attendant spirit or your guardian angel or your soul or your inner voice, whatever you want to call it. So now when we look back at Blake's aphorism, straight is the road to improvement, but crooked is the road to your attendant spirit, to the voice of your soul, to your connection to whatever name you want to give, the larger invisible. So this connects to the whole notion of perfection, because that's another word that is remarkably different. Perfection did not, in the beginning, mean without flaws. To be perfect meant to be thorough.
Mm. Total,
That's a
total
huge,
shifter.
oh my God.
Yeah.
So there's a fork in the road in 2,000 years of education because the reward for being thorough
Yeah,
is to be wholehearted.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's more integration and wholeness in that etymology than there is without flaw.
Yeah, only when we try to be without flaw, we remove ourselves from life.
Hmm. Wow, wow. You've in one of your interviews, you talked about moving at the pace of what is real.
Hmm.
And I wanted you to hold my hand on that because it rang very true. But is is this kind of when you talk about moving at the pace of what is real? Is this the mind, body, soul moving or existing in concert? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I have discovered just very in a real way in my life, and also let me before I detail that say that for me, I feel like so much of being a spirit in a body and time on earth has to do with constant course correction.
Hmm.
That is, I don't believe personally in an arrived state of enlightenment. I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen. I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe the Dalai Lama's there or somebody else, but that hasn't been my experience. So for me, I feel like this journey of being human and being a spirit in a human body is one of today I'm clear and tomorrow I'm confused. And
Mm.
today I fall down and tomorrow I get up. And, we're talking and I might say something clear to you and tomorrow I'll have to relearn it. So, so every individual has to develop their own personal practice of return.
Yes.
What do we do when we lose trust to restore trust? So okay, so now when we look at the pace of what is real, I can't stay in the pace of what is real all the time because
Right.
of just what we just said. But what I notice is that when my heart, mind, and body are moving at the same pace, the pace of what is authentic and real, like tumblers in a mystical lock, everything opens, everything has that extra glow, everything, the oneness of life carries me, speaks to me. And then I get afraid and my heart pounds faster than my body or my mind. Now I fall out of it. So I got to bring my heart back into rhythm, or my mind races, or my body races. So it's not to say, oh, well, I'm never going to live without them being in sync. No, we will because we're human. But if I can pay attention to, when I'm afraid, when I worry, when I'm confused, um, where's my heart, mind, and body? How are they moving? And how far out of sync from each other are they? And then rather than going over in my mind with worry, what I'm worrying about, rather pay attention to how can I bring those back in alignment? And that will soothe my worry.
Mm.
That will connect me to the oneness of
Yeah.
things.
Yes. Yes. So when we talk about this pace of what is real, and then um, I think one of the things you've taught on the most is this return. I underlined it in my notes here to talk about today. The return, like, um, which for you is that when you flag that you're in the headspace and need to recenter back into your heart space? I mean, is that the essence of
Yeah,
what we're getting at?
I think that the return can take place on so many levels. So, but it is, one of the to return to being present, to holding nothing back, to leaning in when life pushes you out, when
Mm-hmm.
worry, fear, and pain push you away. That's when we need to lean back in.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm closed, that's when I need to open. So, I can't stay open all the time, but when I close, I need to open. When I'm afraid, I need to look at what I'm afraid of. Because the word respect
Yeah,
means to
to
look again.
yeah, to look
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
And so so when I'm afraid and I can look again, I'm respecting myself.
Which is totally different than what we've thought respect means, or at least what we were taught in the last 100
Mm,
years.
yeah.
So what are your red flags? Like when you do stray in the moment and the return needs to happen, is that a bodily knowing? Is that a rhythmic of, I'm
Oh,
I'm
sure.
breathing heavy, my head hurts. What
Yeah,
is that?
absolutely. And I think and this is where, again, whatever I share is an example, not an instruction.
Yep. Yep.
So, so as people are listening and thinking about this, we all know that in ourselves. This is what the work of self-awareness, in a very specific way,
Yeah.
is that I'm grounded and I'm rooted and in spirit. But that doesn't mean I'm exempt from the human journey. That doesn't mean that I can't all of a sudden worry. And so one thing that happens is I start to go over things. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried about something, I wind up looping in my head.
Mm-hmm.
We all know this, whether it's, you forget what, you're going over what you care about, or you're going over what someone said, or you're in a situation and it doesn't feel good, or it makes you feel insecure or hurt. So you keep going over it to see if it'll come out differently. Well, that never works. At least it hasn't for me. You have to recognize that, drop it, and return to moving at the pace of what is real. I have a small poem that's called Practicing, and it goes like this. As a man in his last breath drops all he is carrying, each breath is a little death that can set us free.
Yes. Wow.
So we're challenged just when I don't want to let go of it, when I'm going over whatever it is for the fourth, fifth, sixth time. That's when I need to drop it.
Yeah.
Because
Surrender. Let go.
that's what self-awareness, the
Yeah.
work of self-awareness is to say, hey, I recognize I've been here before, and has going over it one more time ever really worked? No. So I got to drop it.
Mm.
I got to drop.
Each breath.
Each breath
Wow.
is a little death that can set us free.
Kind of a sidestep here, but I had this phrase written down too, and I think it pairs well with the wisdom we just experienced. You once talked about learning how in life to absorb and integrate rather than sort and choose.
Yeah.
That was just a magnificent idea for me. Hold my hand in that conversation, because I think those are the moments when we do have that red flag of go, time out here.
Yeah. So to set a context for that, let's look at this archetype, and that is that everyone has to manage surviving and thriving. And like X and Y chromosomes, or like a left foot and a right, you need two good legs to walk, or two eyes. Without two eyes, there's no depth perception. We need to both survive and thrive. And those require different skills, different practices. So, in order to survive and if all we do is survive, what's the point?
Mm-hmm. No meaning.
But we can't just thrive. We are cast here as human beings, and that means we're out in the world. So
Yeah.
you and I are in this deep conversation. Well, if we were walking on the street and we weren't paying attention, we could have this conversation and get hit by a truck. That's part of the surviving. We have to pay attention to being in the world. So all of that to say that we're taught at an early age, all of us, this skill set with the mind, which is a remarkable tool. We're taught how to problem solve and how to sort, prioritize, and choose. So I need to go get medicine at the store. I need to be able to sort through and get the right medicine in order to bring it home for my wife. Okay, but sorting, choosing, and prioritizing is a great skill that helps us survive. It's not a code to live by. It's not a God to pray to. And what I've learned through my life is that while I'm glad that I can sort, prioritize, and choose, and it helps me survive. But everything that's ever mattered, that's real, that's deep, that's life-giving, has stunned me and said to me, no, your heart needs to absorb and integrate. Your heart needs to let it all in and hold it until your heart reveals a deeper logic of the spirit. So it doesn't mean that I throw away my skill of sorting and choosing and prioritizing. It means I need to know where to use it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, at least for me, it never works. Paradox, which is one of the greatest teachers, we could say, is any moment where more than one thing is true at the same time.
That's
well.
Good.
So if we
Yeah.
put on, if we apply sorting, choosing, and prioritizing the work of the mind to paradox, we'll never get anywhere. Because by definition, paradox you need to absorb and hold and integrate so it can reveal a deeper truth. And that requires an open heart and patience and holding off on drawing any conclusions.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, there's the both and of paradox.
Yes.
And even just when you say human being, you're making two separate comments there in a way, right? That
Absolutely.
we are human, and I think as you've said, and then we're also lightning in a bottle. There
So
we behold this infiniteness within us.
And one of the ways, all the traditions speak about it differently, but one, I think, beautiful way to hold this, it comes from the Hindu tradition. And, the Hindu tradition has a trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Those are three deities. So it's a way to understand what we're just talking about, because Brahma is creative life force. It has no form. It just comes into life. And then Vishnu is the life of forms. So that life force enters it enters the tree, it enters the water, it enters me, it enters you, it enters, my dog Zuzu right here. And so then we, as human beings, as the being is infinite and the human's very finite, we are containers that are privileged to be stewards of that portion of life force for as long as we're here. We carry it. That's the lightning in the bottle. Yeah. And it's our job to be good stewards. And we call that portion of life force soul. We call it, there's 1,000 names for it. But then eventually, of course, all forms decay, come to an end, and release that infinite piece of life force, and that's Shiva. Shiva is known as the transformer, which allows the life force to go back and become Brahma again and enter new life forms. But Shiva has been also called the destroyer because, when you understand it from the big picture, you say transformer, but when you're the life form that's breaking down and dying, well, we say, oh, it's destroying me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It's beautiful. Thank you for that. So I think as we move from this moving at the pace of what is real, staying in concert with mind, body, heart, and soul, there was an entry, I think, in the Book of Awakening about living in our hands. And I sent it to a friend of mine he just comes alive when you talk about things about the garden. And I told him, I was like, dude, you just gotta stay in the garden. Like if that's where you're alive, just stay there. But you wrote, to live in our hands humbles our mind into accepting something other than itself. It is how we heal each other and ourselves. We all come alive through a braille of heart. I mean, that's beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Walk with me on this living in our hands.
So this ties to what we've been talking about, authenticity, because the word authentic, which comes from the Greek authentes, means the mark of the hands.
Hmm.
The mark of the hands. So this is the integration of inner and outer. And it's interesting. I learned from a physician, and this is so interesting, that when a fetus is forming, when a life is forming in the womb, the first thing to form is the heart. But the next thing to form is vestiges of the arms and the hands. They actually form, they call them arm buds. They look like little red wings.
Hmm.
So the heart is directly connected to the hands.
Wow, that's good.
Directly. So this is why when we're feeling a lot, we talk with our hands. This is why one of the signs of a heart attack is you feel a pain in your arm, because they're connected. So this brings to the notion of, and I'll have another metaphor here. This brings to the notion that everyone is born with a gift, and our job is to find out what it is and to love it and care for it. And so, you know, the to understand the relationship of the gift to our place in the world, and this I explored in my book, The One Life We're Given, but there's a metaphor that comes from a wooden match. You know, a match
Yep.
that you strike
Yep.
and lights a flame. Well, we all know that a match, the flame is dormant in the tip of the match. And so too our gifts.
Mm-hmm.
We are born with our gifts, but like that match, our gifts don't reveal their light and warmth until our gifts strike against the needs of the world.
That's good. That's good.
All to bring the aliveness of our heart
Yep.
into being.
So I guess I'm connecting a lot of dots right here, right now. But to truly, authentically live in our hands, that can only come from a place of living out from the heart. Is that, am
Yes.
I dialing that in right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, as for me, you know, as far as
As for you and I, we agree.
yeah, you know, someone might see it differently, but yes. So, you know, this is a tool is only as good as the hand that uses it, and that hand is only as good as the heart that guides it.
Wow. Wow.
So we are definitely connected. And what happens through touch is not only do we give, but we receive. And that exchange is how we're more together than alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, I could do this all day. Another section in things that join the sea and sky, and I've heard you talk about this too, is falling below the world. And I kind of wanted to hear you riff on this. You wrote, "So many truths are present when we look up from under our trouble. To fall below the world while still living in the world makes us remember that the truth that waits under our opinions is our home." I mean, that is so good. So how do we, I think you've used like the dolphin metaphor here before.
Yeah, let me talk about that because
Yeah.
it's so powerful, and this is another great teach. So all of these metaphors, the match, you know, these are teachers. These are all teachers. In the Hindu tradition, there's a term upa guru, which means the teacher that is next to you at this moment.
Mm.
So this upa guru is whales and dolphins. You know, so they're remarkable because they are creatures that live in the deep, but they're air-breathing creatures. No matter how long they stay under, they have to break surface. So this helps us understand surviving and thriving. So each of us has to find our own rhythm of going in the deep and coming in the surface. And so as we do that, we can't just live in the deep because we'll drown. But we can't just live in the surface either, because without the deep, we will dry up. So let's look at the water itself, and I'm shifting the metaphor now. So we all know that we see on the surface, we see waves, and we think, but actually it's all one water. Like you go down underneath, that wave goes as a column of water all the way to the bottom. So this is a way to understand how we are in the world, because we can't just choose to be in the deep or the surface. We are always in both. Now, the top 6 inches, let's say, of the ocean, or 8 inches, are always disturbed by weather.
Hmm.
They're always knocked around, churn, gone calm, riptides, surf. That's our psychology.
Yep.
That's the part of our mind and heart that interact with the world. It will always be disturbed by circumstance and weather. If all we do is stay up there, we're going to be battered around. But it's all one water, remember. So when I can't remove myself from the surface, but when I go, as we're talking, under the noise of my trouble, when I allow my heart, when I can, even in trouble, try to move at the pace of what is real and deepen into authenticity and connect to the rest of life, now I'm in the ocean of being. And that doesn't remove the turbulence at the surface, but it right sizes it.
Yep.
It
Yep.
right sizes it.
The truth that waits under our opinions is our home.
Yeah.
That's that deep, deep water you're speaking of.
Yeah. And again, no one can stay there all the time, but we can return. We can remember, I'm being drawn to the surface. I'm feeling battered around.
Mm-hmm.
What do I got to do? I got to go deep.
Yeah.
I have to extend and open myself to everything that's beneath me, through me, beneath me, around me.
Connecting this all the way back to your daily rituals, or kind of some of that morning routine. And you may do it every day, but do you also feel that the day you don't start with letting the light in, then moving to generosity and making your wife a cup of coffee, and then moving to the life that is man's best friend, and then taking notes, like, do you find it's harder to return?
Well, it's harder. I get drawn
there.
Yeah, and I travel a lot, so when I'm not home, I can't do those specific things.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. I can do another version of it wherever I am.
Yeah.
And so, yes, if I don't, it makes a difference if I start my day from that depth, from the ocean of being, or not, because otherwise I'm being battered around and I'm playing catch up. So a way to recognize this for anyone who's listening in a very simple daily terms is, when I'm not starting from an authentic place, I find that I get caught up in that life is not where I am. I'm chasing it, or it's over there, or if I got to get there, if I could only get this done, if I could only get to there, or be like that. And when I do start with authenticity and allow myself to fall below my opinions and in that depth, then I remember and feel life is only where we are.
Yep.
There's nowhere to go.
The mundane becomes magic in that moment.
It does. The extraordinary comes out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
So one other thing that while we're still with this water metaphor, and that is, so all the waves on the top are the 1,000 human moods and feelings. And peace, or joy, I've come to understand, is the ocean of being that holds all feelings. Not the still point at the end of trouble, but the depth of being that holds all trouble.
It's container.
Yes.
Wow, I had never thought of that way. Joy and peace end up being containers in that moment.
Because the truth is, there is no end to trouble. There's no end to waves. There's no end to weather. So I've learned for me that it's when I can be authentically who I am and connected both inwardly and outwardly. Oh, there's something there that's holding the trouble.
Yeah, and even just letting go of peace and joy being a finish line. I mean, I'm kind of I'm processing this in real time, but knowing them as containers, and just letting the light in as your first action of the day, that is a moment to make the container that the day's about to hold.
because the process of living from the heart is letting the light in all day long.
Yeah. Let's go.
Wherever you find it.
Whew, mercy. So, last little riff here from, let's see, what book was it? Yeah, Things That Join the Sea and the Sky. That's going to be my summer journey journal right there.
Thank you.
You write about unraveling our fear. And there was, when you spoke of fear turning into a chameleon, I was like, whoa, this is a big idea. And you write, the haunting thing is that the fear doesn't want to be abandoned any more than I do. So it's willing to transform itself like a chameleon into vigilance, preparedness, efficiency, or productivity. If I could hold my fear, I'd hold my fear and baptize it in the lake of my heart. I mean, maybe I just need to read that and just let it marinate for all of us. But guide me, be my guide here in this idea of fear, like blending in and becoming preparedness, efficiency, or productivity.
So this is basically, in my experience, how fear, if not faced, comes out sideways. You know, fear not faced, it won't go away. So, I learned a great deal about fear from my cancer journey, because in my 30s, I hadn't been through anything life-threatening, and I was afraid of everything. I was terrified. I was everywhere I went in the medical world, and I had to go through so many things. But, my name is Mark, put me out. And so much that they thought my last name was put me out. And but I learned two immediate things. One was not through wisdom, but through exhaustion. I couldn't maintain that level of fear.
Wow.
It exhausted me. So I had to learn to discern. Is this fear? Am I uneasy? I had to make gradations. I couldn't make everything that turned the corner 11 on a scale of 1 to 10, because it just exhausted my heart. Wow. So I was forced to be more discerning and facing the things that I was afraid of. So fear gets its power from not looking. Yeah. And fear gets its power from the future and the past. When we're in it, whatever it is, it might be pain, it might be worry, whatever it is, then we're saying, if it's difficult, oh God, when is this going to end? But it's known, even if it's difficult. But fear comes from jumping forward or going back. So again, like the other things we've talked about, when we do this, because we will, how do we recognize it and return to the present moment? Yep. Return to the moment we're in. So fear comes out sideways, that if I don't recognize or acknowledge or express my fear, because what is not expressed is depressed. Yep. Yep. If I don't express my fear, then it will and hold it, just like a child that you won't give attention to, they will get louder and louder. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Or if I don't feed Zuzu, she's going to be at my side, starting to bark finally, eventually. So, when without attending it, it'll find another way to stay close to us. So that means that, we all want to be prepared about how to survive in life. Great. Nothing wrong with that. But if I don't face my fear, now my preparation gets exaggerated. Now it gets extreme. Now become a survivalist. Now I'm preparing for the end of the world. So it comes out sideways, or I become overproductive. My fear, if I'm afraid that life is too short, rather than face my mortality and have a conversation about living fully
Yep.
with myself and others, well, then I race and I try to produce more. I try to make more. I try to get more money. I try to buy more things. I try to go more places. And all we do is we start to fuel that menacing assumption that, oh, life isn't where I am. It's over there. If I could just get over there. And life, if anything, that almost dying and still being here taught me is that there is no there.
Yeah.
There's only here.
Yes. Yes, and just to name that fear, that's the work of naming fear will be the keys that unlock the electricity of the moment that's at hand.
Yeah. And I think I have a poem in my book of poems. It's a book of 20 years of my poetry called "The Way Under the Way," which I'm so grateful to have. But there's a poem in there that explores the notion of that the most powerful thing you can do when feeling powerless is admit the truth. As soon as you admit the truth of where you are, no matter how difficult, it's empowering.
Sets us free.
It said, yeah, often, I don't want to admit I'm sad, and I already am.
Yeah.
Or I'm afraid of change. When I'm afraid of change, half the time the change has already happened, and I just have to catch up to it.
Yep. Wow, so good. One thing I always ask the people that come on our show is, with the story you've lived and the viewpoint that you've had, and I think you've called it before, we all have our own window to the world, something like that. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, I think, I'm not sure I would give advice to my younger self. I think I would have listened to my younger self and affirmed my younger self in the same way that a greenhouse allows a plant to grow. I think I would have been a greenhouse for my younger self.
Listen to this metaphor. Oh, that's too good. That's too good. Wow. Have you ever said that before?
I don't think so. No.
I was about to say that's a new one. Yes, we need to greenhouse ourselves, allow those seeds to bloom.
And so let's just take that for a second and extrapolate it to caring for others.
Mm-hmm.
We really, no matter how much experience we have, we're really not here to advise each other or fix each other. If you love someone, you want to be a greenhouse for them.
Mm.
You want to help them grow and sprout their own roots and truth and wisdom and heart.
Man, I'm giving you a big high five through the microphone.
Thank you.
So, a lot of people have left us in benediction form, poetry form, whatever kind of stirs within them. Our conversation is good, true, and beautiful. We have moms, dads, artists, creatives, musicians, chefs, business owners, poets, sages. We're just a big honky tonk here, and I always kind of surprisingly ask this question to people of like, for the little bit of conversation that you and I've had and the overview of who we are, would you just leave us with some whatever word or words may come to you, a poem,
sure,
or so forth?
So this is a poem of mine called "The Moment of Poetry," and I purposely call it that because poetry for me is so much more than the manipulation of words. Poetry is the unexpected utterance of the soul. So it's called "The Moment of Poetry." When the sweet ache of being alive, lodged between who you are and who you will be, is awakened, befriend this moment. It will guide you. Its sweetness is what holds you. Its ache is what moves you on.
Yes. And that's a wrap. Hey, before you go, don't forget to hit subscribe right there on your phone. That's probably where you're listening. And if you enjoyed this, would you mind leaving us a review? One of the things that we're wanting to do is get this information out to as many people as we can. And we are finding that when people leave good, true, and beautiful reviews, that helps us get this information out more and more to people all across the world. I do not take it lightly that you invite me to ride shotgun with you in your car. You allow these conversations to be a part of your jogs. You allow these conversations to be a part of the communities and families and businesses that you've been entrusted. I do not take that lightly at all, and I am thrilled that you have joined us here at this table, at this conversation. There's always a seat left. There's always room for more, and we are just so grateful for you guys joining us here at Good, True, and Beautiful. And as you approach this week, may you pause by the orchid, listen to the bluebirds sing, and be love.